So now we were in chapter 6. And in chapter 6, last time, we saw verses 8 to 9. So if we can read that together, everybody has your book. Let's read those two together. Jnana Vijnana Tripta Atma Kutasthah Vijitendriyah Yukta ityuchyate yogi samaloštashma kanchanaha suhrin mitraryudasina madhyastadvesha bandhushu sadhushvapi cha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. This is actually perfect because as I was describing Navaratri, the first 3 days of invoking strength, the next 3 of virtue, and the last 3 of knowledge, what happens in Vijayadashami is verses 8 and 9, which we saw last week, that this person then, who is established in this knowledge, Jnana Vijnana Tripta Atma, who is content with knowledge and abidance, who is Kutasthah, who is unshakable, Vijitendriyah, who is self-controlled, Yukta, who is integrated. They see that oneness amidst all things. So whereas some things tend to increase our value or decrease our value, this Sthita Prajna, or this one who is called Yoga Rudha, the one who's established in this knowledge, they see oneness in all, but they still interact as required. So the example I gave last time was gold. For us, sometimes when we get gold, it seems to increase our value, right? So we would like to display our ornaments, make it known, because it increases our stature, our look, our feel, and our ranking in society. It increases it. But let's say if it was fake gold, then that same ornament that we would display, we would hide and keep it away from other people, because if they knew, it would decrease our stature in society and it would make us feel so incredibly low. So it's quite sad, but something like gold can increase our value or decrease our value. Something like an iPhone. If we have an iPhone, I think 15, whatever the latest one is, then we are so happy to show it off because we feel like we are great. And, it increases our presence, our being. But if we have like an iPhone 11 or something like that, then that's not something we're going to show. We might hide it in the bag and, just keep it there and secretly answer it. So these inert objects, though they are inert, they increase or decrease our value. But for the one who is established in this knowledge, samaloštashma kanchana, they do not see any object as increasing or decreasing their value, whether it is clay, whether it is stone, whether it is gold. And they will use things as they're required, but it doesn't really do anything for their being, their self, their Atma. Then in verse 9, we also saw that this person who is established in knowledge sees oneness in all 9 relationships. How beautifully the Bhagavad Gita, 9 relationships are given. And this person sees that same self in all, but interacts with all according to what is required. And we saw the example of Sri Rama, how he always acted out of pure love. But with Jatayu, for example, who came to help him, he nurtured him and he was there for his last breath. For Sugriva, who was his friend, he befriended him. But when Sugriva was failing to keep his promise, he sent Lakshmana. Ravana, he didn't have hatred for Ravana, but he saw that same self in Ravana, but he did what he had to do. He defeated Ravana. So with each person, he did what he had to do, but he was always acting out of pure love, pure compassion, and pure knowledge. I shared with you last time the battle between Ravana and Rama, right? In one of the days in Valmiki Ramayana, Sri Rama told Ravana, Ravana, you look tired today. We can fight tomorrow if you want. So such compassion he had, even for someone like Ravana. So now we've seen this yoga rudha. We started with saying that definitely what's required to get into a meditative state is karma yoga. We've established that. And when they become established in that meditative state, we've seen what their qualities are, how that manifests. So when this is sort of now given, people are curious. How do we start this meditative practice? If we were to take this journey on meditation, how do we start? So the next set of verses gives us very practical tips on how to start. So we will see first verse number 10. Yogi yunjita satatam.
Yogi yunjita satatam.
Atmanam rahasi sthitaha.
Atmanam rahasi sthitaha.
Ekakiyata chittatma.
Ekakiyata chittatma.
Nirashira parigraha.
Nirashira parigraha.
Yogi yunjita satatam. Atmanam rahasi sthitaha. Ekakiyata chittatma. Nirashira parigraha. So that yogi means that meditator. How did this yogi get established? What were the steps? That yogi yunjita satatam. That yogi keeps his or her mind steady. Satatam, constantly. Where does the yogi keep the mind? Atmanam, in the self. How? Rahasi, in solitude. Rahasi sthitaha, remaining in solitude. Ekaki, alone. And yata chittatma, with the mind and body controlled. Nirashihi, free from hope. Aparigraha, free from greed or hoarding. So let the yogi try constantly to keep the mind steady, remaining in solitude, alone, with the mind and body controlled, free from hope and greed. So in verse 10, now these are the steps to establish a meditative practice. Verse 10 is desha and kala, is tips on the place and the time. So when we say yogi yunjita satatam atmanam, the yogi is to keep their mind on atma when, how often? Satatam. So this word satatam indicates time. So let's talk about time a little bit in the meditative practice. Few pointers here. There's a sutra in Patanjali Yoga Sutras which tells us how to practice. And it says, Satu dirgha kala, nairantarya, satkara asevita drida bhumihi. So this is called abhyasa. What is abhyasa or practice? Drida bhumi. It is that firm foundation or establishment in dirgha kala, in keeping a long time. Nairantarya, without breaks. So constantly. So that word satatam is nairantarya, constantly. And satkara, with due respect. Asevita, that kind of practice is getting established in meditation. So when we talk about time, the meditative practice requires enough time. So it's not something that we can put an alarm to, that I have to get up from my meditation in 20 minutes. And I put my phone here, then all I'll be thinking about is, when is that 20 minutes over? How come my alarm's not ringing? And what am I going to do after this 20 minutes? So we have to have enough time to meditate, because dirgha kala. So not just 2 minutes, not just 3 minutes, but a comfortable amount of time. As we begin, 10 minutes is good, 15 minutes is good, at least between that time. Enough time. And nairantarya means without breaks. So every day, keep that practice, preferably at the same time, because there is something called kala vasana. Just like how we have vasanas, we have kala vasana, or there exists kala vasana. At a certain time in the morning, we become hungry. Yes. At a certain time in the afternoon, we become sleepy. Body radar. At a certain time at night, we become ready to get to bed. So our whole body has a kala vasana, has a vasana of time. At a certain time, the body automatically feels this way. And so therefore, it will gravitate towards that. So the idea is, when we keep meditating at the same time every day, then the body and mind are ready. We don't need to do too much, because they're ready. At 8 o'clock in the morning, let's say I'm ready to eat, right? Or let us say at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm ready to get up. That clock is just ready. It's ready. So there's no effort against it. Now, what time is the waking up? Well, this is a big thing. That is called Brahma Muhurta, the time of Brahma, between 4 to 6, roughly between 4 to 6. This is the time to meditate. Many people say, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, right? So even to meditate for 10 minutes, I don't have time. Or 15 minutes, I don't have time. What is the answer? Wake up earlier. That's all. Wake up earlier and we will have more time. But then some people will say, I still don't have time. Another answer. Meditation doesn't take time. It creates time. It creates time, because when I meditate for 10 minutes, then what happens is we become so efficient throughout the day that what we're supposed to do, what takes 2 hours, we can do in 30 minutes, just because of that simple practice of sitting quietly. So this is called an investment, a smart investment. It's an investment strategy. If we invest 10 minutes of just sitting quietly, it will do wonders for our day. And it'll help us gain balance in our mind. So no time can't be an excuse to wake up earlier. And in fact, meditation throughout the day will give us more time. Now, more about Brahma Muhurta. Why is that time so powerful? It's because the whole world is silent. Most of the whole world, at least, meaning wherever we live, is predominantly silent. So when the environment is silent, completely still, it's a very sattvic time. It's a very sattvic time. And all sattvic energy is helping us sit quietly at Brahma Muhurta. This again happens in dusk. In dusk, when the sun sets, Again, it's a very sattvic time in the whole environment, and it becomes very easy to be quiet and still the mind. Also, in the morning, when we wake up, we don't have any more tamas because we slept the whole day. So there's very less chances of doing this and sleeping. And we are not starting rajasic tendencies yet, because the rajasic tendency awakens around 8:30. All of that awakens that time. So we haven't started that. We haven't started our to-dos and errands and all of these things. So we're done with tamas. We have not started rajas. We are in peak sattva, between 4 to 6. And if we just harness this time, it's incredibly powerful. I can't express that enough. You'll have to see for yourselves. That's called satatam. So this one word satatam, so many meanings are coming out. One, have sufficient time to meditate. Dirgha kala. So no alarms, no like I got to go, I only have 5 minutes. Have sufficient time where you can just sit. And do it constantly without breaks, again and again and again, at the same time, preferably. What if I don't have time? Wake up earlier. Wake up earlier, and that will give us time, and the whole environment will help us because we're in sattva. What if during the day or night, my mind just becomes quiet and I just want to sit quietly? Then do it then. Do it then. Have the regular practice, but know that whenever our mind becomes quiet and still, harness that. Just let yourself go deeply, because that doesn't come very often. So when I feel like just closing my eyes, just close, not in class, but outside of class during the day when we feel that, close, shut off, sit with yourself. So satatam, very, very powerful word. Now, rahasi stitaha, sit in a place in solitude. In solitude. So this means that we can't sit out in a crowd. Don't expect to go deep in ourselves when we're out in a crowd. We will get so disturbed. Sit in a place where we can just be by ourselves and there's minimum distractions. So this rahasi stitaha means solitude, including no gadget distractions. So no phones should be ringing, no alarms should be ringing, no pressure cooker should be going off. None of that. No coffee should be burning. Rahasi stitaha means no outside noise. No outside noise that I can control. Obviously, if we live in New York City, we can't control the ambulance and the fire trucks. Fine. But as much as possible, whatever we can control, and sit in that place. As we have what is called kala vasana, or the vasana of time, we also have the vasana of space or place, desha vasana. So it's important to sit not only at the same time every day, but also at the same place every day. Whenever we go into the kitchen, what happens? We feel like eating. Even if it's not lunchtime or dinner time, we want to open the fridge and eat something. Whenever we're in the bed and we say, okay, I'm going to read this in the bed, what happens? We fall asleep. It's not going to happen. We're not going to finish reading it. We will fall asleep because the bed has that vasana. the kitchen has a vasana. When we are in the living room, we feel like talking. We feel like talking because it has that vasana. So when we establish a place in the corner of our home, so in the corner of our room, keep that for that and that alone. Just like the kitchen is for cooking alone. We don't sleep in the kitchen. The dining table is for eating alone. Huh? We don't sleep in the dining table. The bed is for sleeping alone. We don't cook in the bed. Same way that meditation place should be for meditation alone. Don't talk on the phone there. Don't talk, period, there. Just let that place be sacred. Keep whatever pictures you want on your altar, of incense if you want. Set it up nicely and just keep it clean. That cleanliness will also come. And let that be your special place. That is called Desha. Rahasi stitaha. Sit in that solitude. Have that special place just for you. So special place, special time. And how should one sit? Ekaki, alone. I want to meditate with somebody. No. Because whenever we have somebody there, when we go, let's say we go to a temple and we have somebody there, what's happening? Opening the eyes, checking to see, is that person done yet? And if that person's not done yet, then maybe I could close my eyes a little bit more. Then is that person done yet? Or is that person really meditating? All of these kinds of questions will come. And what happens is we end up meditating on the other person. So ekaki, this is to be done alone. So you're not distracted by anybody else, just by yourself. So you can sit when you want, you can get up when you want. Now, obviously, when we go to temples and take darshan, we're in a group, so that's fine. Or sometimes we do a group meditation online or wherever, that's also fine. These things are fine. But for a daily practice, one should sit alone. If you're doing your practice together, let us say you're doing a family chant together, that's very beautiful. Continue that. Continue whatever family prayer or chant that you're doing. Continue that. But let yourself be by yourself after. Don't feel like you have to then, be with other people. And other people should also know that to leave you after so that you can be on your own. Ekaki. Yata Chit Atma, the one whose mind and body is well controlled. So this word we have expounded on very much, very often in the previous verses. So it just means that, again, that mind has surrendered to the intellect. So the intellect is able to tell the mind, sit still for some time. Just sit still for some time. To meditate on the self is quite difficult right away. If we sit down, we say, okay, meditate on Atma, it's quite difficult. So the preliminary practice that's always prescribed is japa. Japa of a Ishta Devata, an Ishta Devata. So a form of Bhagavan or Bhagavati who is very dear to our hearts or who has been given to us by Guru. The idea is to contemplate on that form, on that mantra, to train the mind. Because without this training of japa, meditating on Atma becomes quite difficult. First, the mind has to learn how to grasp a form. And the mind has to learn how to grasp a sound. So it has to learn from many, many forms, focus on one form. From many, many, many sounds, focus on one sound. from many, many, many different ideas, focus on one idea. The mind has to learn how to focus on one first, one. And then the mind can slowly, gradually focus on the formless, nameless, soundless. So it's a gradual process. So Yata Chittatma means that mind should be well trained, that it can actually focus on something deeper. Japa is a very, very powerful practice in one of the chapters of Bhagavad Gita. I'm pretty sure it's the 10th chapter. Bhagavan Krishna says, of all the yajnas, I am Japa. So Japa is exalted. Nirashihi aparigraha. So, okay, we have the place and we have the time. Same time, same place. Can I sit? Well, it depends. Nirashihi means free from unnecessary wants, unnecessary expectations, free from unnecessary desires. If we still have many worldly desires, many worldly unreasonable expectations, many worldly hopes, if we're still pinning our hopes on the world, thinking that the world can actually solve our problems, or the world can give us happiness, or the world can give us liberation, if we're still thinking about things like that, if we still have our hopes set on the world, then it's difficult to go within, because we will just be thinking about the world and about the world alone. So the idea is, let us say, but what if I do have that? Then at least for the time being, just withdraw from that. Withdraw from that. Nirashi. Then aparigraha. Aparigraha. Parigraha means the one who grabs from all sides. Graha, to grab. Parigraha, grabbing everything from all sides. The one who likes to hoard and accumulate many, many material things. Not only material things, but friendships, relationships, social status, all kinds of things. The one who likes to hoard and keep and keep and keep. It becomes very, very difficult for them to give anything. That's called parigraha. And the idea is, when we have so many things, so much stuff, the more stuff we have, the more thoughts. Every single thing around us that we have our attention on takes up mind space, and we don't realize. So a computer takes up mind space because we have to preserve it, we have to charge it, we have to think about charging it, we have to keep it clean. A phone takes up mind space because, again, we have to charge it, we have to get a case for it, we have to reply to it. It takes up mind space. So all of these extra things take up mind space. A car takes up mind space because we have to get this checkup every now and then. We have to fill gas. So it requires thought. It requires mind space. So the idea is, when we have so many, many things, it requires so much mind space. When there's so much food in the fridge, what happens? What am I going to do with the food? Who am I going to give it to? How long will it last? Where will it go? It requires mind space, doesn't it? But when it's empty, then there's no mind space there. So what we don't realize is everything takes mind space. Clothes take mind space. I have so many clothes. What am I going to wear today? Should I wear this top or that top? Should I wear these shoes or that shoe? So much mind space. So when so much mind space is being used for material objects, how can that mind be turned towards the self? So aparigraha is required because we have less mind space than for material things, and more mind space for the self. This is called aparigraha, having more mind space for the self. So nirashihi, free from these false expectations and hopes and wants from the world, thinking the world can give me what I need. And aparigraha, free from so much mind space that's invested in worldly matters. This kind of person then can meditate. So in verse number 10, what is shown is desha, the place, kala, the time, and also the attitude. The attitude will be shown throughout, but this is just a short explanation. Now we will see the next thing that he's going to speak about. The next thing has to do with the asana. So verse number 11. Shuchau deshe pratisthapya.
Shuchau deshe pratisthapya.
Sthiramasanamaatmanah.
Sthiramasanamaatmanah.
Natyutritam nati nicham.
Natyuchritam nati necham.
Shailajina kushotaram.
Shailajina kushotaram.
Shuchau deshe pratisthapya. Sthiravasanamaatmanah. Natyutritam nati nicham. Shailajina kushotaram. Now this verse number 11 talks about the asana. Asana here doesn't mean the posture. He will talk about that in a future verse. Asana here means the thing that we sit on. Okay, the thing that we sit on. That's called asana in this context. Shuchau deshe. So shuchau deshe, in a clean place. Pratishtapya. So now we have established ourselves in a space, in a clean space and a time. Sthiramasanam atmanaha, with a firm seat on their own. So atmana here means one's own self, not atma like Satchit Ananda, one's own self. Having established one's own self with an asana, with a seat of their own. Na ati uchritam, not very high. Na ati nicham, and not very low. Shaila jinakushotaram, a cloth, a skin, and kusha grass, one over the other. So having in a clean spot established a firm seat of their own, neither too high nor too low, made of a cloth, a skin, and kusha grass, one over the other. Okay. So first, let us look at Shuchau Deshe. That place should be clean. So sometimes we find the place and we have the time, but we don't clean the place. So this is something that should be cleaned every couple of days. So sometimes we'll see the agarbati, there's like so much dust piled up, it hasn't been emptied out. Or the puja thali has so much stuff in there, it hasn't been washed or cleaned. The altar hasn't, the same pictures are there, it hasn't been dusted. So it has to be clean. It cannot be there just like that for so long without anybody cleaning it. It's a place of Bhagavan. So Shuchau Deshe has to be kept very clean. Pratishtapya, having established oneself there, one should have their own asana. Now, just like time has a vasana, place has a vasana, the asana also has a vasana. Vasana means it has its own habitual tendency, it has its own impression or vibration. So ideally, one should have their own seat and sit in that same seat all the time. We can't trade seats. There are some things in spirituality we cannot trade, or we cannot have other people use. We cannot share our seat, our meditative seat. We cannot share our japa mala. We cannot share our mantra. So there are some things that just have to be kept with ourselves, because that vibration is there. And the minute you sit, it's like it's ready. You're ready to take off on that meditation. When somebody else sits on it, then a different vibration is there. So keep your own asana. And that doesn't mean now some people might go on Amazon and say, I need a certain kind of asana, or this asana, or that asana. A simple asana, a simple one which will help us to sit straight. And not everybody can sit on the ground, granted. Then have a chair, but make that your meditation chair. That can't be a dining hall chair and then it becomes a meditation chair. Again, that vibration will come there. So have one's own asana. If one is sitting on the ground, na ati utritam, that asana shouldn't be so high. So this verse is keeping in mind the yogis who used to travel outside in nature and meditate there. So sometimes they would meditate up on rocks or on a plateau. So not to meditate in some place too high, because one could fall down, you know. You'll be kind of scared that what if I fall? And sometimes people have the tendency to rock when they meditate. So not too high where there's a fear of falling, but not too low also, because there might be insects or ants or things like that coming on the ground. So not too high, not too low. And this cloth, skin, and kusha grass, before, in those times, how it was done is the kusha grass, kusha is a certain type of grass, was put. Then ajina means deer skin, and then a cloth, chaila. And with this kind of combination, the seat was neither too soft nor too hard. And the seat was neither too hot nor too cold. So that's the idea of this combination. It doesn't mean we have to go search for this kind of grass and this kind of skin and all of that. Then we'll never meditate, right? The idea is we cannot sit directly on the floor. We can't, because it's too hard. It's too hard. And we cannot sit, some people sit on the bed. We can't sit on the bed because it's too soft. So when you sit on the bed, what happens is you curve. And when we sit on the floor, it's too hard. And not only that, but it's cold. So when a place is cold and it's hard, it's difficult to sit for a long time. And when the asana is just too soft, then we can't sit straight. It makes us bend. And it can't be too warm also, that we feel so uncomfortable. So the proper place, proper asana. So ideally you can put a yoga mat and then a cloth, and you can have a little bit of a pillow, whatever it is, but have a yoga mat, have a cloth, so that you feel comfortable wherever you're seated. So this is about the asana. So clean place should be cleaned, and that person should have their own asana, sthiram asanam atmanaha, not too high, not too low, and not too cold, not too hot, not too soft, not too hard. Okay, now we move on to the next verse. Having established the time and the place and even the asana, what happens now? Verse number 12. Tatraikagram manah kritva.
Tatraikagram manah kritva.
Yata chittendriya kriyaha
यतचित्तेन्द्रियक्रियः
upavishyasane yunjyad
उपविश्यासने युञ्ज्यात्
yogamatma vishuddhaye
योगमात्मविशुद्धये
tatraikagram manah kritva yatachittendriyakriyaha upavishyasane yunjyad yogamatma vishuddhaye. So there in that clean place, in verse 11 it said shuchau deshe, right? Clean place. In that clean place, tatra ekagram manah kritva, having made the mind single pointed. Who is this person? Yata chittendriya kriyaha, the one who has controlled the action of the mind and senses. Upavishya, having seated asane on their own asana. Yunjat yogam atma vishuddhaye. Yunjat, let them practice yogam. Yogam here means dhyanam or nididhyasanam. Atma vishuddhaye, for the purification of the self. The self here doesn't mean atma. It means mind. Okay? So there, having made the mind one-pointed, with the actions of the mind and the senses controlled, being seated on the seat, let them practice yoga for the purification of the self. So first, let's see the description of this person. This person is called Yata. Yata chittendriya kriyaha. Yata. Yata means the one who has control. Controlled what? Kriya. Kriya means prana. Indriya means the sense organs. And then chitta means the mind. So the idea is, if we look at how Bhagavan Sri Krishna has laid this out, all the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are given here. When we say Nirashira Parigraha, that covers Yama and Niyama. Yama and Niyama, the first two limbs. Then we covered Asana, right? We covered Asana, verse number 11. Then Yatakriya means covering Prana, because Prana is the one that enables activity. It's the one that helps us to act. When our pranas are intact, then we're able to do things and run around. So one who has controlled their prana. When somebody is too breathless, they cannot meditate. When the breath has slowed down, has calmed down, that's when someone can really sit and meditate. So in the beginning of meditation, what is also suggested is to watch the breath for a few moments. Just watch the breath and just let the breath become still and slow and natural. Yata chitta. Indriya, the senses should also be controlled. And now that is pratyahara. Pratyahara, again, that's also in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. After we finish these verses, maybe I'll make a chart for everyone so we can see what is written in Bhagavad Gita and what is written in Patanjali Yoga Sutras is exactly the same. It's just a different way of presenting it. So pratyahara, the sense organs should be controlled. All the jnana indriyas and the karma indriyas. So the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, all of that should be controlled. And also the excretion, all of that should be, the speech, the movement, locomotion, all of that should be controlled. So the prana is controlled, sense organs controlled, the mind is also controlled. The mind controlled is that dharana. Dharana. And dharana means the mind has something to hold on to. Why we fail in meditation or in our own practice is because we're not holding on to anything. We're simply sitting down quietly, closing our eyes and expecting that something will happen. No, in the beginning stages, this takes effort. Just like it's the same time, the same place, we have to hold on to the same thought. So that's why I brought up the topic of japa, because hold on to the same Ishta Devata for those who are practicing japa. Hold on to the same mantra. That's called dharana. When the mind is given something to hold, means the mind says, this is what I'm going to think of. I'm not going to think of anything else. This is it. So we can't just sit and say, okay, let me meditate. That's not going to work. For those who are doing nididhyasana, then the mind hold on to that mantra, whatever that mantra that one is contemplating on, hold on to that. And that's it. So that is called dharana, the ability of my mind to hold on to that same object, that same thing. So pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, these three practices of Patanjali Yoga Sutras are given in Yata Chittendriya Kriyaha. Upavishyasane. So having been seated on their asana, what is a person to do now? Yunjat. Let them practice dhyana. So this yoga here is dhyana. So pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. Dhyana means having that constant single pointed thought flow towards that thought, that object which we established in dharana. So dharana is literally, it means tying oneself to that object. We tie ourselves and say, this is what I'm going to contemplate on. Tie ourselves, that's called dharana. So literally tie ourselves. Then dhyana is just letting the same thought flow again and again and again and again and again. And if it goes away, bring it back. It's called dhyana. Why do we do it? Atma Vishuddhaye. So since this chapter is about nididhyasana, this Atma Vishuddhaye, this purification of the self, is a very different kind of purification. It's not the purification that is karma yoga. Karma yoga is purifying the mind of raga dvesha, of likes and dislikes, of these kinds of impurities, of likes, of dislikes, of anger, of greed, of jealousy. If the mind has all of that very, very strong, that means the mind should still be in karma yoga. Can attempt, can do a little bit of dhyana, no doubt, but that mind should do a lot more karma yoga. Here, when we're talking about the purification of the mind in nididhyasana, that purification is what we call removing these erroneous notions. The erroneous notion that I am the body, the erroneous notion that I am the mind, that I am the ego, that I am the individuality, that I am this jiva. That is what nididhyasana does. So it's a subtler kind of purification. So again, like I said, if one is still has or still feels so much desire, greed, lust, anger, all of that, if that's so much, one can still do dhyana, but do a lot more karma yoga, because that requires karma yoga. But for one whose vasanas of those kind have gone down, and what's remaining to work with is that one still feels identified with a body or mind or intellect or ego, then one should invest more time on dhyana. One should do dhyana more. For that subtle purification, to get rid of erroneous notions takes dhyana. Karma yoga will not be able to help with that. So this is now what to do when we've prepared to meditate. Okay, so now I'm just going to recap so we can see what we've done today. Today is talking all about the yogi getting ready to meditate. Meaning, if we want to learn how to meditate, this is what we should follow. Same place, same time. Same clean place, same time. That's just the rule. Our own asana. No sharing asana. And how? Alone, without any distraction of any kind of person or any kind of equipment. And when we are there, then sit down, get the pranas leveled, even, calm, get the senses inward, let the mind hold onto something, and then start to contemplate. And the objective of this nididhyasana is a subtler contemplation. It's about disidentifying with all this matter. Okay? More we will take up next week. Say the closing prayer, and then I'll make a few announcements. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.